I used to believe the world was a stage and all I needed to do was step onto it. My mother always told me that I was born for greatness, her words reverberating in my mind like a melody. She said, "Stella, you've got a spark in you. You just need the right platform to set it ablaze." But dreams, I learned, didn't always come true for people like me. I grew up in a neighborhood where aspirations often collided with reality. While other kids played outside, I spent my evenings rehearsing in front of a cracked mirror. Shakespeare, August Wilson, Lorraine Hansberry, I devoured their words like they were my lifeline. My dream was to perform on the grandest of stages, to see my name lit up in marquee lights. But the world didn't see me the way I saw myself. Black, female, ambitious. Each of those words seemed to be a strike against me. I learned early on that talent wasn't always enough. Still, I pushed forward. I clawed my way into small theater roles, earning applause from audiences that often didn't look like me. I lived for those moments, even if they were fleeting. But when I heard about the audition for The Horizon's Edge, I knew this was it. My big break. The role of a lifetime. The lead character, a bold, complex heroine navigating a dystopian world, felt like it was written for me. The audition was being held by one of the most renowned directors in the industry, Ethan Cole. His films were celebrated for their depth, their ability to make the audience feel every ounce of emotion. To work with him would be a dream come true. For weeks, I prepared. I memorized lines, practiced monologues, and poured every ounce of my soul into becoming the character. I could almost see it, stepping onto that stage, dazzling him and his team with my performance, and walking away with the role that would change everything. But life, as it often does, had other plans. The email arrived on a Wednesday morning, its subject line glowing with an optimism that made my heart race. Audition update, The Horizon's Edge. My hands trembled as I clicked it open. This was it. Confirmation of my audition slot, the next step toward my dream. But as my eyes scanned the lines of text, the air seemed to thicken around me. Dear Stella Monroe, thank you for your interest in The Horizon's Edge. Unfortunately, we regret to inform you that you will not be moving forward in the audition process. We appreciate your time and effort and wish you the best in your future endeavors. Sincerely, casting team, Horizon Productions. I read the email 3 times, each repetition sinking the words deeper into my chest. Regret? Not moving forward? I hadn't even auditioned yet. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears as I reached for my phone and dialed the casting office. My voice was steady, but my heart was unraveling as I spoke to the assistant who answered. "Hi, this is Stella Monroe. I received an email saying I'm no longer being considered for The Horizon's Edge. But I don't understand. I never even auditioned." There was a pause, followed by the sound of clicking keys. "One moment, please," she said. I waited, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. "Ah, yes, Stella Monroe," she said, her voice suddenly hesitant. It seems your name was removed from the list by the casting team. I don't have the exact reason, but removed? Without an audition? Why?" My voice cracked despite my effort to stay calm. I'm sorry. I can't say," she stammered. "You'd have to contact someone higher up for clarification." I hung up, my stomach churning. Something wasn't right. It didn't take long to find out why I'd been disqualified. A friend of mine, Mia, who worked as an assistant in the industry, called me later that day. Her voice was low, cautious. "Stella, I don't know how to tell you this, but I overheard something at the casting office," she said. "Tell me," I insisted. She sighed. "One of the producers. He said they weren't looking for a black actress for the lead. He said it wouldn't sell internationally. They pulled your name before Ethan Cole even saw it." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The words hung in the air like smoke, suffocating me. "What?" I whispered. "I'm so sorry, Stella. I wish I could do something." I thanked her, though I didn't feel any gratitude. My hands shook as I ended the call. Anger and humiliation coursed through me in equal measure. I had known the industry was cruel, but this? To be dismissed, erased, without even the chance to prove myself? For hours, I sat in my tiny apartment, staring at the script I'd printed out for the audition. The pages felt heavier now, tainted by the injustice of it all. But as the sun set outside my window, something shifted inside me. I wasn't going to let them win. When the world shuts one door in your face, sometimes you have to pry open a window, even if it leads to nowhere. That's what I told myself when I picked up my script and headed to the city square that Saturday morning. The square was always bustling with life. Street performers juggling, musicians strumming their guitars, and vendors hawking everything from handmade jewelry to fresh produce. It wasn't exactly a theater stage, but it was a place where people stopped and watched, and for now that was enough for me. I set up near a fountain, the sound of cascading water serving as my backdrop. My heart pounded as I unfolded the pages of my script. I felt exposed, vulnerable, like I was stepping into a cage with no armor. But I had to do this, for myself. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes, and began. The monologue I chose was from The Horizon's Edge, the very role I had been denied. It was the scene where the protagonist, Alara, confronts the crumbling world around her, vowing to rise despite the odds. "You will not break me," I started, my voice steady, cutting through the noise of the crowd. "You think you can silence me, erase me, but I am still here. I will always be here." The words poured out of me like a flood, each one laced with the raw emotion I'd been bottling up since the rejection. Passers-by slowed, their faces turning toward me with curiosity. I didn't care how many people stopped to watch. I wasn't performing for them, I was performing for me. As I reached the climax of the monologue, I felt a shift in the air. The crowd had thickened, the murmurs had died down, and for the first time in weeks I felt seen. I was so lost in the performance that I didn't notice him at first. He was standing near the edge of the crowd, a tall man with piercing eyes and a sharp jawline. His hands were stuffed into the pockets of his coat, but his gaze was fixed on me. When I finished, the crowd erupted into applause. A few people even tossed coins into the hat I'd placed on the ground, though that wasn't why I was there. I bowed slightly, my cheeks warm with gratitude, and began gathering my things. That's when he approached me. "Excuse me," he said, his voice deep and measured. "That was extraordinary. Where did you train?" I looked up, startled by the intensity of his expression. I went to the Jefferson Academy for Performing Arts," I stammered. He nodded, as if filing the information away. "And do you perform professionally?" "Not as often as I'd like," I admitted, still unsure of who this man was or why he cared. He extended his hand. "Ethan Cole." The name hit me like a bolt of lightning. Ethan Cole, the director of The Horizon's Edge, the man whose film I had dreamed of starring in. I stared at his hand for a moment before shaking it, my mind racing. Did he know? Could he possibly be here because of me? No, that was impossible. He had no idea who I was. "I'm casting for a film," he said, his eyes never leaving mine. "I'd like to see you audition." For a moment I couldn't speak. The irony of the situation was almost unbearable. Here was the man who unknowingly allowed me to be disqualified, offering me the very opportunity I had been denied. "An audition?" I managed to say. "Yes," he said firmly. "You have a presence that's rare, and I'd be a fool not to give you a chance." I wanted to scream, to cry, to tell him everything. I wanted to demand answers, to ask him why he hadn't fought for me, why he hadn't seen my potential sooner, but I knew this wasn't the time. Instead, I nodded. "I'd be honored." "Good," he said, his lips curving into a small smile. "Meet me at the studio on Monday. I'll have my assistant send you the details." As he walked away, I felt a storm brewing inside me. Part of me wanted to back out, to refuse the opportunity on principle, but another part of me knew this was my chance to show them all what I was capable of. The weekend dragged on like a storm cloud that wouldn't pass. By the time Monday arrived, my nerves were frayed, my thoughts tangled in a web of doubt and anger. I'd spent the past 2 days rehearsing, not just the script Ethan had sent over, but what I might say when I walked into that studio. Would I confront him? Should I stay silent? Would the truth even matter in a world where I was so easily dismissed? But I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to let fear stop me. The studio was in the heart of downtown, a gleaming building with glass walls that reflected the city skyline. As I stepped inside, clutching my worn script, I felt small, like an outsider trespassing in a world that wasn't meant for me. The receptionist greeted me with a polite smile, but her eyes flicked over me with curiosity. "You're here for Mr. Cole?" she asked. "Yes," I said, my voice steady. She directed me to the elevator, and as I rode up to the 12th floor, I couldn't help but wonder if she knew. Had she heard the whispers about my disqualification? Would the casting team recognize me when I walked in? The doors slid open, revealing a sleek hallway lined with posters from Ethan Cole's past films. Each one was a masterpiece, a testament to his genius. And yet, I couldn't shake the bitterness in my chest. "Stella," Ethan's voice called out from down the hall. He approached me with a warm smile, his presence commanding, yet oddly disarming. "I'm glad you came. Thank you for inviting me," I said, forcing a smile. He led me into a spacious room with a small stage at the front and rows of chairs facing it. A few members of the casting team were already seated, their eyes widening slightly when they saw me. There it was, the recognition. "Everyone, this is Stella Monroe," Ethan said, gesturing toward me. "I saw her perform over the weekend, and I knew we had to bring her in." The room was silent, the tension palpable. I could feel their gazes boring into me, a mixture of shock and unease. One of the producers, a thin man with a sharp nose and an air of authority, cleared his throat. "Mr. Cole, can I have a word with you outside?" Ethan frowned but nodded. "Excuse me for a moment," he said to me before following the producer out of the room. I stood there, frozen, as the remaining team members exchanged nervous glances. I could feel the weight of their discomfort, their unspoken words hanging in the air. Moments later, Ethan stormed back into the room, his face a mask of barely contained fury. "Is it true?" he demanded, his voice loud enough to echo off the walls. He wasn't looking at me. His anger was directed at the casting team. The producer shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Ethan, you didn't think I should see her? You didn't think her talent mattered? What the hell is wrong with you?" The silence was deafening. I hadn't planned on saying anything, but the words spilled out of me before I could stop them. "Mr. Cole," I began, my voice trembling but strong. "They disqualified me before I even had the chance to audition. They said someone like me couldn't sell internationally." Ethan turned to me, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Is that true?" he asked, looking back at the team. The producer sighed, his shoulders sagging. "We were thinking about the market, Ethan. It wasn't personal." "Not personal?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You erased me. You decided my worth based on the color of my skin, not my talent." Ethan's jaw tightened. "This is unacceptable," he said through gritted teeth. "Stella, please. Show them what they missed." I stepped onto the small stage, my hands shaking slightly as I clutched the script. For a moment I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, letting the emotions wash over me. When I began, the room fell silent. "You think you can control me?" I said, my voice ringing with defiance. "You think you can decide my fate?" "No, I decide." Every word was a dagger, every line charged with the frustration and pain I'd carried for weeks. I poured myself into the performance, letting the character's strength and vulnerability merge with my own. By the time I finished, the room was utterly still. Ethan was the first to speak. "That," he said, his voice filled with awe, "was extraordinary." The silence in the room stretched on, heavy and electric. My chest heaved as I stood on that tiny stage, my script still clutched in one hand. For a moment I thought no one would speak. Perhaps they were too stunned or too proud to acknowledge what had just happened. Then Ethan Cole rose from his chair, his hands coming together in slow, deliberate applause. "Brilliant," he said, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Absolutely brilliant." The others in the room hesitated, exchanging uneasy glances. But one by one they began to clap. It was reluctant at first, like they were trying to convince themselves they'd just witnessed what they had. But eventually, the sound swelled, and I felt a flicker of vindication deep in my chest. Ethan turned to the casting team, his expression sharp. "You almost cost us the best talent we've seen for this role. I hope you understand how grave an error that was." The producer who had disqualified me, whose name I hadn't even cared to learn, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Ethan, we didn't mean to." "Save it." Ethan cut him off, his tone icy. "From this point forward, every decision goes through me. Do I make myself clear?" They nodded, their faces pale. Ethan turned back to me, his expression softening. "Stella," he said, "you've just proven beyond any doubt that you're the Alara we've been searching for. The role is yours if you want it." For a moment I couldn't speak. The words I'd dreamed of hearing for so long were finally being offered to me, and yet the journey to this moment had been so painful, so unjust, that it felt almost surreal. My voice caught in my throat. "I want it, more than anything." He smiled, a genuine warmth in his eyes. Then it's yours. After the meeting, Ethan invited me to his office to discuss the details of the contract. As we talked, I felt the weight of everything that had happened begin to lift. You know, he said, leaning back in his chair, I had no idea about the decision to disqualify you. If I'd known. His voice trailed off and he shook his head. I believe you, I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. But it's not just about me. This happens to so many actors of color, so many talented people who never even get the chance to be seen. Ethan nodded, his expression thoughtful. You're right, and I'll do better. I promise you that. It wasn't a solution, not by a long shot, but it was a start. The first day on set was like stepping into a dream. The cameras, the costumes, the buzz of the crew. It was everything I'd ever imagined. And as I stood in front of the lens, slipping into the skin of Alara, I felt a surge of pride. Not just for myself, but for everyone who had ever been told they weren't enough. For everyone who had been erased before they even had the chance to prove themselves. This wasn't just my victory. It was a reminder that talent and resilience could shine through even the darkest of circumstances. As the director called out, "Action," I took my first step into the light, ready to own the stage that had always been mine. Weeks later, when the first trailer for The Horizon's Edge dropped, my phone exploded with messages. Friends, family, even strangers flooded my inbox with congratulations. But the message that stayed with me the most came from Mia, the friend who had told me the truth about my disqualification. You did it, she wrote. You proved them all wrong. And as I looked at my reflection in the mirror that night, the marquee lights from the theater across the street glowing behind me, I whispered the words I'd waited my whole life to say. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere.